Today's video is why I love it and why Star Wars is my GOAT. Now, like any huge franchise that has been out for a long time, you can look at it through nostalgia goggles, anything like that, and it always goes back to when you were a kid, if you were super connected to something like this. For me, that is what Star Wars is. It is what I grew up on as the main franchise of things that has connected me to my parents' generation and to all that stuff. It has spanned the entire time and had a huge impact on me as a kid. All of the action figures, I would spend hours looking at them, buying them, begging for my parents to buy me them. The Legos, all of the lightsaber fights with the small little flimsy plastic lightsabers from Walmart with my grandpa, and practicing to be an actual Jedi in a Halloween costume of Obi-Wan Kenobi. I have a lot of original VHSs. I have memories of thrifting with my grandma for the vintage action figures. My clothes, my room, any accessories, lunchboxes, sunglasses, watches. Playing the Lego video games. My childhood was consumed by Star Wars. Now, I watched Star Wars at least once a week. Depending on what I was feeling, kind of dictated which movies I would watch. I'd spend hours upon hours on YouTube researching lore. Shout out Star Wars Theory, I've always been a fan of you. And I'd even make my own lore. I'd draw my own clone troopers and name them and make my own Jedi and just be completely creative, which I think was a very, very building block piece of my creative side as a child. Now, this video is going to be covering piece by piece a lot of Star Wars, the good and the bad, just explaining to you guys why it is my GOAT in a kind of review / nostalgia format that I want to give. Talking about the movies and TV shows. Now, my favorite Star Wars movie is Revenge of the Sith. And my second favorite Star Wars movie is Return of the Jedi. The amount of nostalgia I have for these two is definitely why they're my favorite. Revenge of the Sith is definitely a better movie than Return of the Jedi. And even technically, Empire Strikes Back, I feel, is a more technically sound movie. But the impact that Return of the Jedi had on me as a kid is why it's my second favorite. And that is okay, because everything is subjective. Everyone can have an opinion. For Revenge of the Sith, I mean, you have the culmination of Anakin's character arc.
You underestimate my power!
Just cementing him as my favorite character arc in all of Star Wars and probably cinema, like insane. You have the ending battle with him and Obi-Wan, the best lightsaber fight in all of Star Wars. And, I mean, just Obi-Wan in general. You had the best version of Ewan's Obi-Wan. I mean, probably the best part of the prequel series.
You were the chosen one!
I mean, Ewan is amazing, and Obi-Wan is my favorite character in all of Star Wars, and it's just amazing in this movie. And Revenge of the Sith, I mean, so many emotions for me as a kid, and that's why it's definitely my favorite. Now, for Return of the Jedi, for my defense of why it's my favorite, the entire Jabba's palace sequence, like the first 40 minutes of the movie, I adored as a kid. I thought it was so cool. It was just awesome. The ending lightsaber fight with Vader and Luke, and, you know, the Emperor sitting right there, and especially the scene where they cross lightsabers on the Emperor's face and he starts laughing. Absolutely beautiful, crazy, awesome. I've watched that so many times. Even though people kind of crap on them, I absolutely love the Ewoks. Obviously, being a kid, having teddy bears mixed in with your favorite Star Wars characters made it even better, and yeah. And Return of the Jedi has the GOAT ending of anything with when Luke sees all the Force ghosts. I absolutely adore that scene, and it's just awesome. Now, for Empire Strikes Back, I definitely love this movie. The greatness is warranted. It deserves the appreciation it gets, and I appreciate everything. The story is beautiful. The more serious, grounded tone is beautiful. Everything with Vader and Luke is absolutely awesome.
I am your father.
And personally, for me, other than probably the Vader and Luke stuff, I love the Dagobah scenes with Yoda. They're just so nice and fun to watch, and it's just like probably one of the most defining moments in Star Wars is a little crippled, silly Yoda training Luke. It's just awesome. Now, before I move into any other stuff, I just want to talk about the last original film, which is A New Hope. Now, I don't like this film as much as a lot of Star Wars, but I still do very much like it and appreciate the greatness of it. It is such a pioneering film for not just Star Wars, but movies in that matter. And now, despite it coming out in 1977, it still hits to this day as a classic and original. You know, it kicked off the story with a great plot and concept. And it does have slightly dated effects, but it has a very, very well done story. And for being, like I said, made in 77, the effects do hold up. Now, the other two Star Wars prequels have slight problems for the wide variety of people, but for diehard fans just like me, they are a bright representation of the story of Star Wars in the mind of George Lucas and what he thought Star Wars as a story and a whole should be. Now, The Phantom Menace is the slower of the first two, but it's setting up Anakin's character and the story of Star Wars as a whole. Now, it has one of the OGs, Qui-Gon Jinn, who's an awesome character, and the second best lightsaber fight ever with Darth Maul, another awesome character in Duel of the Fates. Overall, Phantom Menace I think is a very overhated movie, and it is a great kickoff to the prequel trilogy and had so much impact on me as a kid with Qui-Gon and Darth Maul and young Anakin and pod races and all that. Now, Attack of the Clones is just a very fun sequel to just continue the story with
I don't like sand.
Much better, amazing Obi-Wan, the awesome Count Dooku, and the arena scene with all the Jedi and droids is just such a banger to watch, even to this day. Such a replayable scene that is so memorable and amazing. And the main part is it introduces the clones, which, because of the Clone Wars show, are some of my favorite parts of Star Wars. Again, I think this is a very overhated movie.
I hate them!
And I absolutely adore it. Now, speaking of the Clone Wars, they were introduced in Attack of the Clones. The Clone Wars is one of the most defining pieces of media in all of Star Wars for me. I grew up watching this just hand in hand with all the movies, and I was the perfect age to grow up right in the peak time that this show was coming out. I was 16 when the show ended, so every age before that I was just always watching it when it was out on live TV. I love animation, and this show really grew that love, but the writing and characters are what makes this show absolutely amazing for me. We get some of our favorite characters from the main movies, but some of my personal favorite characters in Star Wars came from this show, like Rex and Ahsoka. Giving the clones personalities makes this so much fun, and the clones are probably one of my favorite parts of the show, other than Obi-Wan and Darth Maul. And with the ending of the show finally coming back, thank you, Star Wars fans, it just goes right into Order 66, and it's just such an A-plus piece of Star Wars that means so much to expanding the story. And man, the Clone Wars it means so much to me, and I absolutely adore it. Now let's jump to the sequel trilogy. Let's talk about it. Now, I really do think that the sequel trilogy is overhated. They are not any means on the level of the other Star Wars movies, but they are not as god-awful as people make them seem. Most of the characters are pretty damn stale, do not get me wrong, but they're not, like, bad either. And I can understand some of the criticisms, but I think just completely shitting on this is not okay in the context that it's still Star Wars. It feels a little different. It's not quite what we wanted, but it doesn't mean that it's dead as a whole. Kylo Ren is definitely the highlight of these movies. The visuals and set pieces are very up to Star Wars standards, and they are cool. But I do wish they handled the original cast better, like especially Luke. I absolutely hated his character arc. It wasn't badly written, but it did suck to see how he was written. Now, it was just kind of sucky to see him be lame the whole time and have that arc, but I mean, it is what it is. I think, we got what we got. It already happened. We can't just keep shitting on it and trying to disregard it. Personally, I'll just watch other Star Wars compared to this sequel trilogy, but I'm not gonna be the 0 out of 10, get the pitchforks ready Star Wars fan. I'm a lot more open-minded, and I'm just excited to see maybe what they can do to improve on these characters. For example, the Rey movie. If they can absolutely nail that and give a lot more context in scenes for some of the plot holes that was created throughout this, I think it can add so much more depth to the characters, especially Finn. And it just not feel as empty and kind of stale. But maybe they can just add some more context, and I just really hope they can nail it. And if they don't, well, then I guess I'm the meathead for being optimistic. But I really hope they do, and I'm more of an optimist than I am a hater. So let's just see what comes out, man. Now for the other TV shows that impacted me. And I'm a huge TV guy. I love movies, especially Star Wars. But getting to see them in the theaters is definitely what sets them apart from the TV shows. But sitting at home with a piece of long-form Star Wars that I can binge, or if they do weekly releases, be excited for every week, is awesome. Now my favorite show besides the Clone Wars would be The Mandalorian Seasons 1 and 2.
This is the way.
Now, while I do think Season 3 is not the best, and it's definitely overhated, because at the end of the day, we did get to see Mando, we did get to see Grogu. I just wish the writing was on par with Season 1 and 2. I think Mando Season 3 kind of falls under the sequel trilogy kind of thing, where it's not god-awful, but it's just the writing feels kind of empty. You get your favorite characters, but the writing is just a bit empty. Season 1 and 2 is top tier, and the obsession I had with Mando and Grogu was absolutely crazy. The show felt fresh, it had mysteries for every character's backstory that made us want more info on them. They wrote stuff in a very interesting way, not bland, not just nostalgia baiting with forced connections every episode. And having Grogu be a literal baby Yoda who couldn't communicate was also genius, because almost zero of Yoda's identity or backstory is given to us, and it made you root for Din to succeed in his mission so we could just learn more about Grogu. I think that was just a genius move, and it's so awesome that they did that. And Season 3 can easily be redeemed with the upcoming movies that they're making. If they can just let Favreau and Filoni cook like the first two seasons, I think they're going to explode the Mando back into a positive light. And most of all, I will be so ecstatic to see Din, and especially my boy Grogu, on the big screen. Now, all other Star Wars is very up and down. None of it's to the level of things I've covered so far, and in the other parts of it, you have the good side, like Rogue One, Rebels, Tales of the Jedi, and, the Bad Batch. I think Rogue One creates new characters with some life in it, and there's the cool connections to the Death Star and Vader, hallway scene. Rebels had some filler, but it was very, very cool, added context to the timeline, and had, most of all, lots of lovable characters. And the Bad Batch, boy, it's just an amazing extension of the Clone Wars. Also had some filler, not quite to the par with the Clone Wars. But come on, the Bad Batch characters are awesome. I love all of them. And Tales of the Jedi is just more amazing content and context to our favorite characters, like Qui-Gon, Dooku, and you get it in Clone Wars animation, so what is there to complain about? All very, very good pieces of Star Wars. And on the other side of that, there is the absolute trash that breaks my heart that they even had to make with how bad they were, like Book of Boba Fett.
Like a bantha. Yes?
And Kenobi. Now, Boba Fett was pretty much just pussy Fett and not like his character at all. And it's pretty bad when the Mando episodes were better than Boba's in his own show. And I should just say that. Those Mando episodes were pretty fire though, with Luke and Grogu and stuff. Very good. Now, Kenobi breaks my heart the most because Obi-Wan is my favorite character in all of Star Wars. It had so much bullshit filler. Absolutely horrible character that was Reva. She was just awful, annoying, and survived so much crap that she shouldn't have, and I just wish she wasn't in the show. And the most annoying kid ever to this point in Star Wars, Child Leia. Don't even get me started on that chase scene. The show just had brain dead writing and character decisions, just things that they just wouldn't do. A 12-year-old Star Wars fan could write the show better than that with what the hell decisions they were thinking. There was one good part of the show, and it was Ewan and Hayden together in the final episodes. So if you at all want to have a positive outlook on Kenobi, skip any scene that doesn't include a red or blue lightsaber, because that's about the only times that this show was remotely good. Now, taking in everything that we just covered, it's obvious to me Star Wars has way more good than bad. It does have its misses, yes. Has Disney changed the feel of the franchise? For the most part, yeah. But everything's not lost, and everything is not trash. Most of you have probably heard the term, no one hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. That is true with anything new, really, or anything that has a change to it. I know it's not George Lucas anymore. I know there was some bad stuff that has come out. But Star Wars is not dead. It's not what the overreacting fans have said. I will stand on my defense of Star Wars until I die. No matter what happens from here, we still have lots of amazing content that I love. I pray Disney learns from their duds and hires the proper writers and people to handle these stories they deserve with care. Right now, it feels as if half the time you have Filoni carrying the proper legacy of these characters and stories, but then a random miss that will inject itself into the story and kind of shows the control part of Disney that has, plagued some of their top writers in these stories and it just doesn't allow them to fully up to their potential, like Ahsoka, for example. Most of that show was great, but the final episodes, it feels like someone else injected their hand into the writing. And with the projects like Kenobi and Boba, it just feels like there's zero people creating the show that have any idea of the characters they're dealing with, and zero fan interest in them. And you gotta be a fan if, come on. And now Star Wars began with passion for the content that was being created and put out. Creating interesting and realistic characters in a straightforward yet complex story that the fans loved. With time, the content just expanded those already loved stories while creating new and interesting plots. Star Wars has some of the most die-hard fans on the planet, and if you're not a fan, I guarantee most people are aware of one thing from Star Wars. When handling possibly the biggest franchise in history, you need that same care put into the stories like how it was when it was created. For Star Wars to continue to live on, and not continue to have the bad reputation and mediocre content and explode back into the mainstream with positive fans, it needs that creative care. The franchise will always hold the most special place in my heart. It's consumed so much of my time in the most positive way possible throughout the years, and I'd hate to see it fall with the potential that it has. Despite any negativity, at its core, Star Wars is amazing, and to me, is my GOAT.